Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&Day Reviews here with part 2 for the CCC event guide. I know this has been a long time coming, but I've been pretty busy, so hopefully this is still going to be able to help a lot of you people who are struggling with Kiara. This portion of the guide is just going to focus on the Kiara fight, as well as some of the additional quote-unquote challenge quests that come after the fight. Everything else in the event was covered in my part 1 video, so go check that out if you haven't already. It'll be linked in the description below. In addition, there's going to be timestamps in the description, so you can skip ahead to whichever part of the video you need the most. And with all of that said, let's talk strategy. Before even starting the fight with Kiara, there is a lot of stuff to cover. First and foremost, if you're struggling to get up to the Kiara fight, it's most likely because you haven't bought the key items from the shop. If you're at a loss for what to do in the story, make sure you complete the missions that reward Sakura money, and then use that Sakura money to buy the key items from the shop. That's going to open up new story missions as well as new free quests. And if you don't see any missions that reward Sakura money, just complete whichever missions you can, and it might open up new ones that do reward Sakura money. So just basically keep completing missions and using the Sakura money to open up new story missions until you get to the Kiara fight. Once you do reach the Kiara fight, there's going to be a new section of the shop that opens up called the KP shop, and you can actually spend the KP points that you've been earning by completing missions to buy things from the shop. The only things you can buy from the shop are going to be debuffs for Kiara. So each item you buy is going to make the fight easier and debuff Kiara in a very specific way. There's actually a ton of debuffs that you can buy to make the fight easier, so I'm going to split this into 4 different difficulties for the sake of convenience. First off, we have hard mode, or the hard difficulty, which is when you don't spend any KP at all in the shop and you just go straight into the Kiara fight. This is going to be obviously the most difficult way to beat Kiara, as you have no assistance whatsoever. Next up, I have what I consider normal mode, which is buying the Melt Death Whip item from the KP shop. That's going to cost you 15,000 KP points, and what it does is it prevents Kiara from transforming into her strongest form. I consider this normal mode because even though it is a massive debuff, it isn't as drastic as the rest of the debuffs that you can buy for this fight. So if you are looking for somewhat of a challenge, or you just don't feel like farming all the missions, I advise going for normal mode and just buying the Melt Whip from the shop. If you want to take it one step further, you can go on to easy mode, which is spending 31,000 KP in the shop. By spending 31,000 KP in the shop, you're actually going to be able to purchase debuffs that remove skills from Kiara. Things like her passive attack buff, defense buff, her NP buff, and her resistances to Arts, Quick, and Buster cards. If you're someone who's free to play or doesn't have a huge pool of servants to pick from, or maybe doesn't have a top tier art servant or anything like that, then I suggest doing easy mode. And then finally, we have very easy mode, which costs 34.5 thousand KP. In the last week of the event, there's going to be additional items for purchase in the KP shop, which is going to be debuffs for Kiara. So this time, you're not only going to be removing skills and abilities from her, but you're actively going to be debuffing her. You'll be able to purchase things like reducing her quick card resistance, her arts card resistance, her buster card resistance, reducing her NP damage and HP recovery effects, and even preventing her NP seal on her Noble Phantasm, or even allowing yourself to use a continue when you die. I consider this very easy mode because you can practically just win it with any team. So if you're just really looking to breeze past this without any challenge whatsoever, and you don't mind farming all the missions for the KP points, then you can go for this. And remember, those very easy mode options may not be available just yet until the last week of the event. Now let's talk about the fight itself. So once you get to the fight itself, there's obviously multiple different ways to approach it. I will not be covering how to solo this in hard mode or anything like that. I do recommend watching Mist or Toho Sniper. They have very fun videos where they face Kiara on hard mode, so I do suggest checking them out. But I'm only going to be talking about the easy mode or normal mode for this fight, aka the version of the fight you have when you purchase Melt Death Whip from the KP shop. So as you can see, this fight's much more manageable Kiara is going to have 2 break bars. She's going to start off with 400,000 HP, then 350,000, and then 300,000, as opposed to the million plus HP she has in hard mode. And one thing to note about this fight is that Kiara is going to be weak against alter egos, so keep that in mind when you're constructing your team. She's also going to have the skill Hisage Makyo, which is going to grant her a bunch of very strong effects, including increased attack, increased defense, increased NP strength, resistance to all card types, healing every turn, etc. Like I said in the earlier part of this video, you can buy more stuff from the shop to remove all of these effects if you're willing to spend 31,000 KP. She's also going to have a skill that increases her crit strength significantly, but that again can be removed by purchasing something from the shop. So let's talk team setups. I highly recommend using an arts team for this fight. The reason why is arts teams traditionally have a lot more NP spam potential and they have a lot more survivability, and this is going to be a long fight. So you need to have a team that can sustain itself for the long run, which means you're going to have a front line that has a healer, a staller, and a damage dealer. I would additionally recommend having a secondary damage dealer in your back line, as well as a support, and of course Mosh. For recommended servants, let's take this on role by role. For healers, I recommend Hans, Media Lily, Tamamo, Merlin, and Jean. These are going to be the best of the best that you can bring here. They all have very strong healing capabilities, very good NP spamming capabilities, and overall just top of the line supports. Hans, Tamamo, and Merlin are also very strong buffers for your attacker, while Media Lily can remove all your debuffs, and Jean can keep you alive with invincibility. If you do not have access to any of those, or they're not highly leveled, then you can also go with Irisfield, Marie, Martha, Nero Bride, or Nightingale. Moving on to damage dealers for your team, I highly recommend Robin Hood, Melt, Vlad, Kuro, Squirtoria, and Saber Lancelot. Robin Hood and Kuro are going to be your best free-to-play options. Obviously, Robin Hood's going to deal tremendous damage, while Kuro is fantastic for NP spam, as is Squirtoria. Vlad can hit very hard, as can Saberlot, provided you give him crit stars. And Melt actually has an advantage because she's an alter ego, as well as a very good kit for difficult fights like this one. Your other options also include Ibaraki, Emiya Alter, and Nero Bride. And finally, you're going to need stallers. Those are going to be servants that are going to be able to prevent Kiara from wiping your team, preventing her from noble phantasming, lowering her damage, etc. I highly recommend Waver, Mosh, Media, Kiara, and Amakusa for these. Waver is the best of the best when it comes to this. He has a stun, he can lower her NP charge bar. Mosh is fantastic for keeping you alive. Media can remove her buffs. Kiara has incredible sustain and can also remove NP charge. And Amakusa is also great for stunning or removing Kiara's buffs. Additionally, you can also try to use Daeon, Edison, Shuten, and George. And if you're curious about who to use in your back row, I suggest having a strong solo or servant, someone like Herc, Ku Alter, King Hassan, Cleo, or Ozymandias. All of these servants are strong and they work great on their own without much support, so if all things go to hell, they can come in and clean up. As for your recommended Mystic Code, I highly suggest the Atlas Mystic Code. It's simply the best thing available when it comes to survival. And as a general strategy, you should always focus on survival over damage. Surviving is a lot more important than dealing an extra couple thousand in damage. So make sure you properly time your skills and don't waste your abilities. And finally, let's touch on the challenge quest, or rather the epilogue quest that you face after beating Kiara. You need to beat these quests if you plan on getting an NP5 BB, because each one is going to reward you with an extra copy of BB. I should also mention that all of the enemies in these quests are weak to alter egos except BB, so if you do have Melt, Kiara, or Passion Lip, they're very much worth bringing. Let's start off with the first fight, which is against Nero. You're going to be facing regular Nero and then Bride Nero. For this fight, you're going to have a 100% increase to your Buster card effectiveness as a buff, and this is going to be super easy. Just make sure you bring archers. Once you break her break bar, Nero's going to grant herself Guts 3 times, reviving herself with 10,000 HP. Not much to deal with, it's a very easy fight if you have a capable archer. Next up, we have the Tamamo fight, where you're going to be facing a caster Tamamo, followed by a lancer Tamamo once you break her break bar. For this fight, you're going to be getting a 100% buff to your arts card effectiveness, and the main strategy for this is to treat caster Tamamo like a joke. Her NP doesn't really do anything except heal herself for a tiny bit, so you basically should just be using her caster form as a punching bag to build your Noble Phantasm, so that when her Lancer form arrives, you can KO it in 1 or 2 turns. So make sure you have a Saber or 2 with maximum NP gauge for Tamamo Lancer, so that she doesn't get her Noble Phantasm off. Next up, you're going to be facing Emiya. He's not going to switch classes, so he's going to remain an archer, and you're going to be getting a 100% buff to quick card effectiveness. Right off the bat, you should bring Ku. Ku is going to hard counter Emiya, and can easily win you this fight on his own. Not only is he going to be dealing double damage thanks to that buff, but he also has a single target Noble Phantasm that's going to wreck Emiya, and he has protection from arrows to avoid Emiya's Noble Phantasm, which means even after breaking his break bar, you have nothing to fear. And last up, we have BB herself. The first part of this fight is going to pit you against a bunch of enemy Shadow Servants, and then finally BB comes out with 2 break bars. So this can be a very daunting challenge at first, but just keep in mind that you're facing Shadow Servants and their HP isn't very high. So if you just bring wave clearing berserkers like Fran or Raiko or Lancelot, you should be able to clear the initial wave of Shadow Servants very easily without much effort, and just keep a ruler in your backline for when BB shows up. Once BB does show up, she's likely going to wipe out your berserkers, and that's when you can have Martha Ruler, Jean, or Amakusa come out to deal with her very easily. Just keep in mind that BB does inflict charm on somebody when she does come out, so you might want to have some form of debuff removal ready. And remember, BB can also remove invincibility from her enemies, so Jean's Noble Phantasm isn't going to be a guarantee save. After beating BB, you also unlock the final mission, which is a battle against Shiki that's going to be very similar to the Tamamo, Emiya, and Nero fights. For this fight, you're going to be stuck with a 50% NP down debuff on your team, so make sure you have some form of debuff removal to remove this ASAP. So bringing someone like Media Lily is perfect to remove this right away. And once you do that, the fight is very straightforward. Just try and kill Saber Shiki as quickly as you can so you can avoid her AoE Noble Phantasm and her very hard crits. And that's everything I had to say about the Kiara fight and the subsequent battles. Just remember that when you do fight Kiara, if you are struggling, you always have the option of going to that KP shop and making the fight just a bit easier for yourself. No reason to stress yourself out. You're still getting the same exact rewards, whether you beat her on hard mode or very easy mode. And also, if you haven't completed the event just yet, you still have plenty of time, a little bit over a week left, but this is about the time you're going to want to start making use of your apples. Your natural AP might not be enough to save you. So if you do have a storeroom of apples, make sure you start using them now, and make sure you finish up all the missions so that you can get all your copies of BB and all her Ascension materials. And if this guide did help you with that fight, then make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so that you can be up to date with my other guides and spotlight videos. If you haven't already, do follow us on Twitter, Twitch, and join the party over at our Discord. I will be streaming the rest of the CC event this week and weekend, as well as the Kiara fight. I'll be facing her on hard at least once to see how it goes, so if you want to laugh at me, be sure to be there, and I will catch you guys in the next spotlight. This is SE.RA.PH signing out. Later.